He is the most disciplined woman in prison. Simply American LiuXiaqing. Other inmates smoke and chat every day. He can't keep fit. Even if it's windy or rainy, you have to run 5 kilometers. The eldest sister looked at it and admired it. I gotta hand it to you, honey, you just heard a hate driving you off. Physical labor that others avoid. He goes up. Just to give your arms more strength. But he fought so hard, not to find a young man to fall in love with after getting out of prison, enjoy a wonderful life, but for revenge on her husband. He disciplined himself, sending yourself to prison. It turns out that what happened to Libby today was murdered by her husband. 2 months ago, he pretended to buy a luxury yacht for Libby's birthday. Her best friend also offered to help take care of her son. Libby basks in the double sweetness of love and friendship. I didn't notice at all that my husband and girlfriend were already flirting with each other. She spent a loving day on the boat with her husband. I feel like the happiest person in the world. Until midnight, she was suddenly awakened by a pungent smell of blood. Only to find himself covered in blood. The room became a murder scene. Husband is also missing. No matter what Libby calls. Only the howling of the sea breeze. The more Libby goes out, the more thrilling it gets. Blood spreads to the railing. Did the husband fall into the sea? There's also a shimmering dagger next to it. Libby was just about to pick it up and check it out. A beam of light shines. Morning Star, this is the Coast Guards, to the night down there and step away. I don't know. Where my husband is. Said to have been murdered, but they salvaged all night at sea without looking for it. To Nick's whereabouts, Libby became the prime suspect. Because Nick had a huge insurance policy worth $2 million before he was born. Beneficiaries face up to Libby. Libby has 100 mouths. He and his husband have always been in love. How could you do this? The police only look at the evidence. There are only traces of Libby and Nick on the boat. Only Libby's fingerprints were on the murder weapon and dagger. All the clues are against him. Even if Libby is wronged again, I can only grit my teeth and stand trial. Finally, the judge convicted him of murdering his husband. 9 years in prison. Libby's star has reached rock bottom. He is worried about his 6-year-old son. I can only ask my girlfriend to help take care of it. My best friend was in tears. Promised to take good care of the child. And brought her to visit Libby every week. With the promise of a girlfriend, Libby is much more at ease. She transferred $2 million treasure to her son. And swallowed the grievances with tears. While worrying about the whereabouts of her husband. While nervous about the future of himself and his son. Life in prison is not easy. The son is Libby's only hope. 1 to Saturday. His best friend will bring him to visit. The son is very well behaved. I study hard. Libby was relieved. But a month later, my girlfriend's phone suddenly got disconnected. Libby was anxious and angry, worried that something might happen to them. He had an idea. Pretending to be a girlfriend and calling the kindergarten, falsely claiming not to have received the salary. He got his girlfriend's new phone number and address. Libby hastily dialed. Sure enough, I heard my best friend's voice. Hello, Angie. Angie, he angrily asked why he disappeared without a word. The girlfriend is evasive and refuses to answer directly. And called my son over to divert attention. I'm mommy. Hello, sweetie pie, just talked to my son. I heard a familiar voice, Daddy. Nick. Libby looked dumbfounded. Isn't the husband dead? Why are you at your best friend's house? Could it be that all this is a conspiracy just to get rid of himself and defraud the treasure? Stay with your girlfriends and fly together. Libby digested it all in disbelief. He can't figure it out. Husband has always been in love with himself. How could it be so vicious? But the cold of the prison reminded him of his current situation. Yes, he was betrayed. Libby calmed down all night. He decided to go to the insurance company to pick up his husband's fraudulent insurance. The other party's attitude is cold. Libby hung up the phone. Seeing others unreliable, Libby can only pin his hopes on himself. A cellmate who used to be a lawyer told him, "The law doesn't convict the same person twice. As long as he can perform well, he will be released from prison as soon as he kills his husband in front of the police station for revenge." The police don't care about him, and that suggestion became Libby's motivation. He started working hard to get fit and improve his fitness, but also actively rehabilitated in prison, and it was very quickly received. Finally, 6 years later, Libby gets early parole. As soon as he went out, he couldn't wait to investigate the whereabouts of his best friend. "My best friend is a kindergarten teacher. Just check the teacher system to find his new job unit." But Libby was dumbfounded after checking. There are actually more than 1,000 girlfriends with the same name. Libby doesn't have time to look for them one by one. He can only find the kindergarten where his best friend worked. Ask the principal about the whereabouts of his girlfriend. The principal is very embarrassed, although I know that Libby owes. But Libby was rejected due to confidentiality regulations. Libby had no choice but to take risks. Sneaking into kindergarten late at night to find my best friend's chin. However, it is already quiet time. Petty Officer Gia saw that Libby did not return to the dormitory on time. I guess that he must be looking for his son. He sent to police officers to find Libby. Once found, he will be sent back to prison. Officers quickly found the kindergarten when they heard movement outside the door. Libby realized he had been exposed. Fortunately, he has found the information of his girlfriend. Libby jumps out of the window with the data. The police are also chasing after, thanks to Libby's hard work in prison. The current police officer is no match for him at all. Libby fled all the way to the sea. Use a beach to overturn a police car. Too bad he is outnumbered. Finally, he was caught by the police. Petty Officer Gia personally pressured Libby back to prison. He also wanted to plead that he had been wronged. The fake sergeant didn't believe it at all. Every prisoner feels wronged. He only believes in the law. Libby was leaned against the car by the fake sergeant. He looked at the keys in the car. I looked at the water pipe outside again. Suddenly a bold idea. Libby starts the car, trying to bump off the handcuffs. But the first one just knocked the water pipe out of the spark and accidentally knocked off the car in front of him. Second, Libby steps up efforts. Knocked the door handle loose. He tries to pull the handcuffs out. The handcuffs don't move. Petty Officer Gia noticed his movement. Hastily chased down. Libby is in a hurry. Locked the carriage quickly. Drove the car into the ocean. Two people wrestle in the water. Seeing the water getting deeper and deeper, fake sergeant couldn't bear to watch Libby drown. Kindly released the handcuffs. Libby stole the fake sergeant's gun. Anti-mobile game. Petty Officer Gia still wants to chase, but was wounded by Libby's palm. Rescued by the crew. Libby swims all the way to the coast. Escaped to land. He came to his hometown. Mom is here to grow vegetables. After hearing what happened to her daughter, he poured out all his savings to finance his daughter's revenge. Libby thanks her mother for her dedication. I have also strengthened my determination to seek revenge from my best friend and husband. He came all the way to the 4S store, buying a car in the name of a girlfriend. After successfully getting the sales to find out the address of his girlfriend, Libby chased after it non-stop. Look at the luxurious villa in front of you. Libby has 5 mixed feelings in his heart. Is this the love tide they bought with the money they hurt him? Libby knocked on the door nervously. I only saw a boy around 10 years old. Is this your son? And he didn't know how to react. He didn't realize it wasn't his son until the hostess came out. The other party told Libby. They just moved in. We don't know anything about the previous occupants. Recommend Libby to ask the old lady next door. The old lady said that her best friend died in a gas leak 3 years ago. Then her husband and children moved away. Libby doesn't have to guess to know that it must be the husband who is doing the trick again. He didn't expect his husband to be so vicious. He thought he framed himself because he loved his best friend. It seems that he doesn't love anyone at all. Only love Kian. Libby found the news of his girlfriend's accident in the library, trying to find clues from above. Sure enough, he found a familiar painting in the background. It is a masterpiece by the famous painter Xiaoqing Driver, only available by auction. Libby find gallery. I want to inquire about the buyer's information from here. He deliberately distracted the staff. Search from the database yourself. It was found that the name of the person who bought the talk was Seaman. But then he heard a familiar voice. I didn't expect Petty Officer Jia to come here all the way to find him. Luckily Libby was alert enough. He jotted down the information quickly and snuck out before Petty Officer Jia could get in. In order to prevent the fake non-commissioned officer from tracking Libby, he simply crashed his car and scrapped it, then run away. He found a hotel based on her husband's information. Found out that her husband was holding an auction as an unmarried woman. What I'm selling is the chance to spend a night with him. Libby feels so sick. How could anyone be so shameless? Obviously vicious, the husband has to disguise himself as a high-quality bachelor. But he had to endure the nausea. Find a way to get in and find out the whereabouts of your son. A high-end dress is a must for this occasion. It's not hard for Libby, who's used to being your wife. He calmly arrived at a 5-star hotel, pretending to overhear a lady's name and room number by accident. Then she used her identity as a lady to deceive a dress worth tens of thousands from a luxury dress store. Put it all on the lady's head. Yes, very good, Mrs. Critch, Suite 1420, after decorating herself. Libby arrives at the auction. Luxuriously decorated box. It's all about the insurance money that framed Libby. The more he looked, the more he hated him. But he still has to pretend to be kind. Bidding with other rich women for the chance to spend a night with her husband. At first someone bid 500. Husband is not satisfied with this number. He promised himself to be an aristocrat. I feel that without 10,000 pieces, I am not worthy of his dignity. The bid gradually increased to 5,500. Husband wants to be taller. Libby has long seen through his mind. Just pull the price to 10,000. Will the lady take us to $10,000? The husband smiled with satisfaction. He happily announced the results of the auction. But when Libby appeared, his eyes glazed over. He didn't expect Libby to be released early. I can still find Libby in front of me, but he shows disdain. He didn't bother to talk too much. Asked directly about the whereabouts of your son. Husband still wants to cover up his feelings with lies. Said that he deliberately faked his death to leave the insurance money to Libby's mother and son. Libby rolled his eyes. This lying technique is too clumsy. He doesn't have time to listen to his nonsense. Because the fake sergeant was also traced here. Libby can only threaten her husband to bring her son tomorrow. He would have killed him to vent his anger. Then he ducked and left the party. Petty Officer Jia found her husband. He doesn't know his husband's true identity. I thought Libby was looking for him for something else. He and his husband talked about having Libby arrested and sent to prison. Husband pretends to be innocent. Promised to help. But there is a vicious conspiracy in my heart. He's not going to give the fake sergeant a chance to catch Libby. Then all the ugly things he did will be exposed. He had to silence Libby himself. To keep the current rich life. Libby asked her husband to take her son to a cemetery attraction. Lots of tourists there. Can cover them from leaving. Just when Libby was full of expectations, the husband said that the son was shy and refused to come. Libby has no doubts. Calling his son and walking over. The son is even more dodgy. Libby catches up. Completely oblivious to her husband's conspiracy. He ripped off Libby again. There are no sons here at all. The little boy is just an actor he hired. Just to lower Libby's vigilance. He had already prepared an abandoned coffin. Locked Libby in. Want to starve him to death. Marrying such a vicious man. Libby is so unlucky. A life that could have been smooth sailing. But because he caused countless waves. Luckily Libby brought a lighter and a pistol. Not only can it illuminate the environment, can also break the lock of the coffin. Libby managed to get out. There was only one thought in his mind at the moment, is to rip her husband to pieces. He rushed towards his husband's house aggressively. And someone pulls him aside. It turned out to be a fake sergeant. He finally found out the truth. Knowing Libby's injustice. Now he has forgiven Libby for what he did to escape. Because he is also indignant at his husband's actions. I didn't expect such a vicious man. He must be brought to justice, the false sergeant comforted Libby patiently. And they discussed a plan with him. First, the fake officer finds the husband. He pretended to blackmail his husband. Say you already know the truth. Must be 1 million to seal. The husband thought he was going to work with him. Happily told the process of murdering Libby. In fact, the fake sergeant has already left everything behind. Libby came out. This time he stopped talking nonsense, threatening her husband with force to account for her son's whereabouts. Otherwise, he will die. But they still underestimated the viciousness of their husbands. He had a gun ready. Fight back when the two are not paying attention. Sergeant Jia was unfortunately shot. Life and death uncertain. Libby also hid in fear. The husband has turned back into that vicious scumbag. He no longer pretends to talk about marital love. Raised the gun directly at Libby. I didn't expect someone to shoot first. Sergeant Jia struggled to his feet. Saved Libby's life. Between Petty Officer Jia and her husband, Libby finally gets a chance to get his gun. This time, he finally took his revenge. In the past, he was too soft-hearted to give his husband an opportunity. Hurt him again and again. Push him into the abyss. Now he finally never got a chance again. But it's still too cheap compared to what Libby has done, this scum. Libby put Petty Officer Jia in the ambulance. Thank you for your help. Unexpectedly, a husband who is by his side every day is not as kind as a stranger. After the fake sergeant recovers, Libby accompanied him to his son's school. He was perturbed. I don't know if my son will remember him after 6 years, Maddie. Maddie, it turns out his worries were unwarranted. How can the affection of blood thicker than water be washed away by time? They told me you were dead. Libby hugged his son tightly as the only spoils of this failed marriage. He never wants to be separated from his son again. Petty Officer Jia's recording exonerates Libby. The husband's property was also passed on to his son. The son lives with Libby. After so much suffering, Libby had a new life. After having children, wealth, and a dead husband, he finally left the person who brought him the storm. I can finally live the life I want.